In a world where injustice seems to dominate, a sincere question can touch even the most powerful hearts. Why do good things happen to bad people, while others like me suffer so much? The city was alive, pulsing with the sounds of cars, laughter, and hurried conversations. The streets, full of people in a hurry, seemed to ignore anyone who wasn't wearing an expensive suit or carrying designer shopping bags. However, in the midst of the incessant flow of life, there was someone who was invisible to everyone, someone whose footsteps echoed on the dirty sidewalks without being noticed. The boy was there, observing the world around him with attentive but silent eyes, as if he were just a shadow in the middle of it all. He was about 10 years old, but his face was marked by the weight of a life that seemed to be much harder than that of other children his age. His dirty hair and tired eyes spoke of nights spent on cold and lonely streets. His clothes, old and ragged, didn't give him the slightest protection against the cutting wind. He was alone, with no one else by his side, except the strangers who passed quickly, oblivious to his presence. Yet, despite his visible misery, there was something about the boy that was more than just pain. He wasn't just surviving, he was questioning. His eyes were fixed not just on the reality around him, but on what lay beyond, on those questions that everyone, at some point, asks themselves, but rarely has the courage to ask. Why all this? He thought, looking at the imposing buildings in front of him, seeing the rich and happy people going from one side to the other, while he, a homeless boy, felt left out, excluded from a world that seemed to smile at everyone but him. How could a God allow such good things to happen to bad people while others, like him, were forgotten on the margins of society? The answer seemed distant, and perhaps that was why he felt an inexplicable urge to seek an explanation, someone who could shed light on that inner darkness. It was a question that accompanied him every day as he walked through the city's vast streets, observing the world with the gaze of someone still trying to understand his own existence. That afternoon, as the boy walked through the central square, something caught his attention. There was a large gathering taking place, a charity event, something that caught the attention of the most powerful people. The sound of voices, the movement of people, the commotion that formed around a familiar figure. He approached, feeling a mixture of curiosity and a touch of hope. It was Donald Trump, the President of the United States, who was there at an event to raise funds and help those in need. As if he were a magnet, the crowd around him seemed to be drawn to his imposing figure. The boy didn't know exactly who he was, but he knew that his presence was powerful, that he had something that could change the lives of many, including his own. And there, in the middle of that crowd, an idea began to form in his mind. He decided to ask the question that had been on his mind for weeks, something that no one had ever explained to him properly, something that he felt deserved an answer. As he approached the stage, he felt a great deal of anxiety, but curiosity drove him. He raised his hand, which caused several eyes to turn to him. Silence hung in the air, and the tension seemed to grow as he prepared to speak. With a low, trembling voice, but with unshakable sincerity, he addressed Trump. Why do good things happen to bad people, while people like me suffer so much? The sound of his question seemed to echo for a moment, leaving the air suspended. The people around him fell silent, some curious, others surprised by the boy's courage. Trump, who was in the middle of a relaxed conversation with other members of the charity, stopped talking and looked directly at him. It was as if for a brief moment, the entire world around him had disappeared, and only the boy and his question existed. In the boy's eyes, Trump's words could be the key to something bigger. After all, he had seen so much inequality in his short life, the luxury and indifference of big cities, and at the same time, the pain of the streets, the lonely nights, and the closed doors to those who didn't have what people considered important. The boy felt that this wasn't just his pain, but the pain of so many others who were out there, invisible, just like him. As Trump looked at him, the boy kept his eyes fixed, as if he wanted his question to be not only heard, but understood. What he didn't know was that this question, so simple yet so profound, would bring with it not only an answer, but also a path to a new perspective. The introduction of this unexpected encounter was more than just an interaction between a boy and a public figure. It was the beginning of a reflection on the complex questions of faith, justice, and purpose that we all face in some way. And as the crowd waited for Trump's response, the big question the boy raised was not just about the injustice of the world, but about how we can find purpose and strength even when the world seems unforgiving. The silence that followed the boy's question seemed almost palpable. It was as if, for a moment, the constant buzz of people around him had ceased, and all that was left was the intensity of the question. All eyes were on Donald Trump, who stood in the center of the stage, staring at the boy with an expression that was a mix of surprise and contemplation. The boy, for his part, remained motionless, as if the weight of the question itself had drained all of his energy. His eyes, however, were fixed on Trump, seeking something more than a common answer. He wanted meaning. He wanted understanding. He wanted something that could fill the void he felt when observing the apparent injustice of the world. Too many present. The question seemed simple at first glance, but its depth resonated with each person's personal experiences. Who has not wondered why so often good people face adversity, while those who act cruelly seem to prosper? In the crowd, a woman whispered to her husband, "That's a tough question." Even for a president, someone else, closer to the stage, murmured, "Let's see if he can answer." But for the boy, the question wasn't philosophical or rhetorical. It was a visceral question, born of years of suffering and silent observation of the inequalities around him. He had seen wealthy men and women walk past him without looking. Luxury cars cruised down the street without paying attention to the weary faces of children like him. Deep down, he knew that the answer wouldn't change the world, but it might change something inside him. Trump stepped forward, adjusted his microphone, and looked directly at the boy. He seemed to be thinking deeply before speaking, something unusual for someone who usually answered the toughest questions readily. There was a respectful silence in the air. As he finally began to speak, "That's a question that doesn't have an easy answer, kid," he said, his voice heavy with gravity. "But I'll try to do justice to the depth of what you're asking." He looked around the crowd, trying to engage everyone in the conversation. "What you asked is something many of us have wondered. Why does it seem like some people, even those who do not do the right thing, have so much? And why do those who are struggling, like you, not get what they deserve?" Trump paused, looking back at the boy, who was not looking away. "The truth is, sometimes the world seems unfair. It seems like the bad guys win and the good guys lose. But that's because we're only looking at part of the story, not the whole." The crowd began to react in different ways. Some people nodded silently, while others murmured among themselves. It was as if the boy's question had touched a collective nerve, bringing to the surface doubts and frustrations that many had kept to themselves. A middle-aged man among the spectators commented, "That's something I've always wondered, especially when I see how some people get rich by exploiting others." A young woman near the stage added, "But what can we do about it? Just accept it." These comments reinforced the importance of the moment. The boy's question had transcended his personal experience and become a universal point of connection. Trump continued, "When we look at the success of bad people, we often forget one important thing. What they are gaining may not be as valuable as it seems. Money, power, luxury, all of these are temporary. In the end, what really matters is the impact we leave on the lives of others." He then gestured with his hand, pointing to the crowd. "Think about it. The people you really admire, the ones you want to emulate, are the ones who have done something good, who have used their lives to create something meaningful, not just for themselves, but for others. You have something inside you, kid, something that a lot of bad people don't have. You have compassion. You have a heart that wants to understand, that wants to make a difference. And that, even though it seems small now, can turn into something very big." To illustrate his point, Trump shared a few stories. Think about Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in prison for fighting injustice. During that time, he could have given up. He could have turned bitter and become a hater. But what did he do? He walked out of that prison and became a symbol of peace and reconciliation. And think about ordinary people, like a single mother I once met. She faced unimaginable hardships, but used those experiences to create an organization that has helped thousands of underprivileged children. These stories show that suffering can be transformed into something meaningful, something that leaves a lasting impact. The boy listened intently, his eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and emotion. He seemed to be absorbing every word, as if trying to find the deeper meaning behind them. At the end of his answer, he finally spoke, his voice a little stronger than before. "So you're saying that the bad things that happen now can help me do something good in the future?" Trump smiled, nodding. "Exactly. We don't always understand why things happen at the time they happen. But in time, we can look back and see how those hardships prepared us for something greater." The interaction between the boy and Trump had created a powerful moment. The boy didn't have all the answers he was looking for, but he felt that something inside him had changed. As the crowd began to applaud, Trump prepared to continue his speech, this time sharing a personal story that further connected the issue of injustice with the possibility of overcoming it. The crowd was still applauding when Trump gestured with his hands for silence. He seemed thoughtful, as if the boy's question and his own words had awakened something within him. Silence reigned again, and this time everyone's attention was completely fixed on his next words. "I want to share something personal with you," he began, in a more intimate tone. "Maybe this will help illustrate what I'm trying to say." Trump paused briefly, and the crowd grew even more attentive. It was rare to see him share something so personal, and that in itself made the moment special. "When I was a kid," he continued, "my father, Fred Trump, always said that success is not just about what you achieve for yourself, but about how you impact others. At the time, I confess that I didn't quite understand what he meant. I was just a kid, and to me, success seemed to be about winning and being the best." He smiled slightly, as if remembering something nostalgic, and then changed his tone. "But there was a moment that changed my worldview. When I was about 12 years old, I remember a man who worked for my father. He was a carpenter. He always seemed happy, even though he worked so hard. One day, I asked him why he always smiled, even though he knew he would never be rich." Trump paused, looking out at the crowd as if reliving that memory. He answered something I have never forgotten. "Money isn't everything. What matters is the legacy you leave. I may not be rich, but I am building something with my own hands, and that is something no one can take away from me." That answer made a deep impression on me, although I only understood its true meaning many years later. Trump continued, "Too often we look at difficulties as burdens, as things that prevent us from achieving what we want, but in reality, they are opportunities for growth." Trump turned to the boy again, now speaking directly to him. "I know it seems unfair, kid. You shouldn't be living like this, but the fact that you're here today, standing here asking this question, shows that you have something special inside of you. Not everyone has the courage to question the world or seek answers, and that's something that can take you very far." The boy seemed emotional, but he still struggled to fully comprehend Trump's words. "But what about the people who continue to do bad things and still have everything?" he asked, his voice full of frustration. Trump nodded, as if acknowledging the legitimacy of the boy's doubt. "I understand how frustrating that can be, but let me tell you something. What seems like everything isn't always so. Many of these people are trapped in their own traps, living lives without purpose, without meaning. In the end, it's not what you have that matters, but who you are and how do you use what you have to make a difference." "Now, let me ask you something," Trump said, leaning slightly toward the boy. "If you could do anything in the world, what would you do?" The question seemed to catch the boy off guard. He hesitated for a moment, looking at the floor, as if he had never really considered the possibility. Finally, he answered, "I think I would help other people like me." Trump smiled, pleased with the answer. "That's powerful, and you know what's even more interesting? Many of the most successful people I've ever met started out that way, with a genuine desire to help others." Trump then turned his attention to the crowd, who were listening intently. "I think everyone here can learn something from this. Boy, sometimes we need to go back to basics. Remember why we do what we do. It's not just about ourselves, but about the impact we can have on the lives of others." He paused, letting his words resonate, and then concluded, "Suffering may seem unfair, but it can also be a teacher. It can teach us resilience, empathy, and purpose. And in the end, it is these qualities that define who we truly are." The applause that followed was deafening. Some in the crowd seemed moved, while others seemed deeply thoughtful. The boy, for his part, stood still, absorbing everything that had been said. He didn't have all the answers, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time, he felt that his pain was not just a burden, but perhaps the beginning of something greater. As the crowd's applause faded, the atmosphere around them seemed to change. There was something special in the air, an energy that brought people together. The boy's story and Trump's heartfelt response had created a moment of profound connection, a rare meeting of vulnerability and hope. Trump looked at the boy again, but now he was also looking out at the crowd, as if he wanted to extend the lesson he had learned in that moment to everyone. He knew he could not let the moment pass without drawing from it a universal lesson, so he prepared to share a message that would transcend the boy's individual experience and touch the hearts of every person present. "There is something very special about moments like this," Trump began, gesturing toward the boy. "They remind us that no matter who we are or where we come from, we are all searching for the same things: meaning, purpose, and justice." He paused, allowing his words to resonate, before continuing. "The question this young man asked is not just about him or me. It is about all of us. Who here has never wondered why bad things happen, or why bad people seem to prosper?" Many heads in the crowd nodded. It was clear that the question had touched a nerve in everyone. But as I said before, we don't always see the whole picture. Our purpose is often hidden in the hardships we face. Trump began to illustrate his message with simple but powerful examples from everyday life. Think of a nurse who works endless hours caring for patients she doesn't even know, or a teacher who dedicates her life to teaching children who may never thank her for what they've learned. These people may never be rich or famous, but they are changing lives. He paused, watching the crowd's reactions, before concluding, "And often, these people act not in spite of hardships, but because of them. It's suffering that shapes empathy. It's struggle that builds resilience." Trump then stepped forward, as if to get even closer to the crowd, and raised his voice in an inspiring way. "What I want all of you to take away from this moment is simple. The world needs more people who turn their pain into purpose. People who look at suffering, at injustice, and say, 'I can do something about it.'" He turned back to the boy, "And that starts with you, kid. The question you asked today may not change the world right away, but it changed something here, right now, between us, and that's a start." Trump then extended his hand to the boy, who hesitated for a moment before taking it. The gesture was met with a chorus of applause from the crowd, who seemed to share the emotion of the moment. After the gesture, Trump turned to the crowd again, this time with a more direct tone. "This is not just a time to reflect, it is a time to act. Each of you here has the power to make a difference, whether it is by helping someone in need, like this boy, or by contributing to your community in other ways." He began listing practical actions that anyone could take: volunteering at shelters or community organizations, mentoring young people who need guidance, supporting small causes that often go unnoticed. Trump made sure to emphasize that it was not about grand gestures, but about consistency and intention. You don't have to be president, a businessman, or famous to make an impact. What matters is the desire to make a difference, one small step at a time. The crowd seemed deeply impacted, as if Trump's words and the boy's example had sparked a new sense of purpose. Some people were seen wiping away tears, while others seemed deep in thought. Be aware of the questions that come from those around you, especially children. Often, they hold the answers we are seeking. And remember, no matter how small your action may seem, it could be the difference between hope and despair for someone. As Trump concluded his speech, the crowd began to disperse, but the energy of the moment remained in the air. The boy's story and the impact of his question would continue to resonate for days to come, inspiring those present and eventually reaching others through their shared words and actions. As the crowd began to disperse, the boy stood there, holding in his mind the words he had just heard. He wasn't sure what to make of them yet, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time, he felt that his pain was not just a burden, but an opportunity for growth. As Trump had said, the cool night wind made him pull up the worn collar of his coat. He looked around, seeing the faces of strangers who now stared at him with curiosity and admiration. Some waved at him, as if to say they believed in him. It was a new and somewhat strange feeling, but comforting. That night, as he searched for a safe place to sleep, he reflected on everything that had happened. Trump's words echoed in his mind, "Suffering can be a teacher." The boy couldn't shake the idea that perhaps there was something greater waiting for him, something he couldn't yet see. He began to remember the hard times in his life, the cold nights, the days without food, the looks of pity or contempt he had received on the streets. But now, those moments didn't seem so unbearable. They seemed, somehow, part of a larger story that was still being written. He began to think about what he had told Trump when asked what he would do if he could. "Do anything. I would help people like me." The idea was simple, but powerful, and for the first time, he felt like it might be possible. The next morning, he decided he didn't want to just think about what he had learned. He wanted to take action. He remembered a group of people he had often seen handing out food and clothing to the homeless in a nearby park. Despite his shyness, he approached them and asked to help. The volunteers were surprised at first, but they soon welcomed him with open arms. They gave him simple tasks like sorting laundry or delivering meals. Though small, these actions made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. As he worked, he began to hear other people's stories. Some were similar to his own. Others were different, but just as powerful. Each story seemed to confirm what Trump had said about suffering being a teacher. One of the volunteers, a woman named Clara, noticed something special about the boy. She noticed his dedication and his natural ability to connect with people. "You have a gift, kid," she said one day as she folded a blanket. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." These words stayed with him, fueling his determination. Clara began to mentor him, teaching him about how organizations that helped those in need worked and how he could use his life experience to inspire others. Over time, the boy began to gain confidence. He began to help not only with physical tasks, but also to talk to people, listen to their stories, and offer words of encouragement. He realized that often what people needed was not just food or shelter, but someone to listen and believe in them. He also began to share his own story. He told how, in a moment of despair, he had met an unlikely figure who inspired him to believe that his life could have a greater purpose. His story began to spread, and others began to join the group of volunteers. Inspired by his journey, years passed, and the boy, now a young adult, had become a respected community leader. He had helped to establish a shelter for homeless youth, where he provided not only a place to sleep, but also education, job training, and emotional support. One day, he received an unexpected invitation. Trump, hearing of the impact the boy was making, wanted to meet with him again. The meeting took place at a public event, where the young man had the opportunity to share his story with an even larger audience. "It all started with a question," he said, looking at the crowd and then at Trump, "and with someone who made me believe that my pain could be transformed into purpose." The young man concluded his speech with a message for everyone present. No matter how difficult your life is right now, every challenge we face is an opportunity for growth, a chance to find our purpose. Sometimes, all we need is someone to believe in us, and when we have that, we can do the same for others. The audience erupted in applause, and the young man realized that his journey was just beginning. The reunion was symbolic, not only for him and Trump, but for everyone who heard the story. He was living proof that even the most difficult situations can be transformed into something meaningful. The event where the young man shared his story had come to a close, but the impact was only just beginning. The audience was filled with a reverent silence, as if each person there was reflecting on how to apply those lessons to their own lives. The young man's words, combined with the poignant experience of his childhood, had planted seeds of inspiration in every heart present. Trump, visibly moved, took the stage once more to conclude the event. He was not known for moments of vulnerability, but something about that night prompted him to speak in a more personal way. this young man. He began, pointing to the young man now seated in front of him, showed me something that I think we all sometimes forget, that the hardest questions come from the most unexpected places, and often from the youngest people. He paused, looking out at the audience, before continuing. When he asked me why good things happen to bad people, he wasn't just looking for an answer. He was looking for hope, and today, he is living proof that such hope can be found. Even in the most challenging circumstances, Trump turned to the young man and nodded in greeting. Your story is not just yours, my friend. It is a testament to resilience, faith, and purpose. The young man returned to the stage alongside Trump. As the crowd applauded warmly, he held a microphone, but seemed to hesitate before speaking. When he finally did, his words were simple but powerful. I just want you to know that no one is so lost that they cannot be found, and no one is so weak that they cannot become strong. His words had a profound impact on the audience. People were seen wiping away tears, holding hands with those next to them, as if united by a common experience. If you are going through something difficult, remember this: the bad things that happen to you do not define who you are. What does is what you choose to do with them. Trump took the microphone one last time to close the event with a message that tied together everything that had been discussed that night. Today, we saw the power of resilience, the impact of purpose, and the importance of believing in something bigger than ourselves. But it can't stop here. Each of you has the power to carry this message forward in your communities, in your families, in your own hearts. He paused for emphasis on his final words. Never underestimate the power of a question, especially from someone young, and never underestimate the impact you can have on someone's life simply by believing in them. The crowd erupted in applause, and Trump, along with the young man, left the stage to a standing ovation. As the lights in the auditorium dimmed, the young man reflected on what this moment meant. He knew his journey was just beginning and that there was still much work to be done, but he also knew that he was not alone now. He had a community, a mission, and a clear vision of the impact he wanted to make. As he left the event, he was surrounded by people who wanted to thank him, share their stories, or just give him a hug. Each interaction reinforced the lesson he had learned. True purpose is not something you find, it is something you create, one small step at a time. The video of the event, captured by strategic cameras, was edited and shared on social media, reaching millions of people around the world. Similar stories emerged in the comments, showing that the message of hope and resilience was touching hearts everywhere. Phrases like "I needed to hear this today," and "this story changed my perspective on life" multiplied. The video became more than just entertainment. It became a beacon of light for those facing their own struggles. The video ended with a now more confident young man saying directly to the camera, "If you are watching this, know that no matter where you are right now, your life has value. Your pain can be the beginning of something amazing. And together, we can turn hardships into hope and purpose. Suffering can be a teacher. Purpose is in the hands of those who choose to transform pain into strength." With that, the video came to an end, leaving a lasting mark on the hearts and minds of everyone who watched it. So, did you like this story? Leave a comment and see you in the next video.